a lot of people don't get all the destruction that hydro causes, because people think, oh, well, it's not burning carbon, so it's clean. But like, you also are essentially killing whatever river you put that in. You have the flooding in the lake that you create, and you have changes to the entire ecosystem of the whole river, right? Like all the downstream effects, the fish, and then the animals that eat the fish, the people that live off the water, the temperature of the water changes, like all of these things. And then, 10, 20, 30 years down the line, you see like massive infrastructure changes, massive environmental changes, like over the course of time caused by this dam, continually, but very slowly altering that ecosystem. And we see in China, because China has, well over 100 hydroelectric dams, that you have all these problems of when there's droughts, they're worse. When there's flooding, it's worse. You have problems with the fish that live or no longer live in the river. And all the plant life, and then the people who live along, everything, it has all these huge downstream effects. So if you're going to have that regardless of, any of the economic stuff when you build hydro, but then the hydro itself is losing money for you, Bolivian taxpayers, right? If it has to be subsidized. So I think this is the crazy thing. And when you get China to come and build it, China's just they don't care about the environmental impact, right? Because all they want the money to build it. They get the money for their workers. Since Bolivians aren't really building it, then there's no Bolivian local expertise. So when the dam needs repairs, who are you going to call? Well, none of the Bolivians know how to fix it. So you got to call China again. Right. So it's just this ongoing, deep, deep debt.
Exactly. And on top of all of this, you also have a human rights issue, because it's a human rights violation to forcefully displace indigenous communities, when, especially if it's their territory, it has been their territories for hundreds of years. And on top of that, they never agreed to this. And legally, they should have been a part of this conversation. And it's not only that indigenous groups have not agreed to many of these constructions, they have taken the proper legal measures to sue the state, to say that this is their territory and that they shouldn't have to be displaced. Yet all of these things, again, when you have such a weak rule of law in the country, and this is something that even the government itself very happily admits when they need to ask money from, say, the European Union to do legal reforms, but then they never actually do them. When there is no rule of law, what's the hope of any civil society or any Bolivian, even more indigenous communities, on suing the states or action to defend their territories, when in reality, the government, as it has already shown, it's going to do what they want to do. It's such a corrupt system. And I think this is something that I would really like to highlight for your viewers, and I would invite them to look at CONTIOCAP. I'm going to try and leave that written somewhere. This is an association of many, many indigenous leaders in Bolivia who are often speaking up about this, who often are the ones that are telling people about how there are no environmental studies to these Chinese projects. And people like me, we look at them in awe, because we know that these are the people, the indigenous leaders, that we need to support in order to protect our territories. Because at the end of the day, this is not only an issue of indigenous peoples in Bolivia, but I insist the protection of the environment in my country, especially given how we're already so affected by global warming, is something that is a priority, should be a priority of the entire population and even more of the government. But like I've said so many times, and I'm sorry I keep going back on this, it's heartening to see how the Bolivian government prioritizes over the rights of its own citizens and the constitution that they themselves enacted.
Well, so I'm curious about what was going on in the interim government, where these Chinese projects were put on hold, not canceled, put on hold. The coronavirus pandemic began. What was the view of China during that time? I imagine popular support must have even gotten even worse for China. But I imagine there might have been also vaccine diplomacy going on for China. Just what happened in that period, and how did China manage to turn it around so things went basically back to the status quo?
Well, one thing that a lot of us pointed out to begin with the environmental subject before we go into the other ones is that the Bolivian government could have canceled many of these projects. And it was really a red flag to us that they only paused them. They didn't take firm action in order to cancel this, even though it had been proved so much that these were illegal. There was so many violations of human and environmental rights in the making of these projects. And at the same time, the transitional government, kind of their whole marketing was that they were going to be the exact opposite to the Morales government, right? So it would make even sense in that, to be coherent, they should have also canceled these things, but they didn't. And then when it comes to the thing is the and I'm just going to say this plainly, the Bolivian opposition leadership is very weak. It leaves so much to desire, and we, as environmental activists and as civil society, and I hope this is very clear for your viewers, we oppose the Morales government, but that does not mean we necessarily like the opposition either, because we know that Bolivian politics is often driven by elites and not necessarily the interests of the people. So in a way, the transitional government tried to have a closer work with the other end of the geopolitical spectrum. So there was a lot of vaccine diplomacy going on with the USA embassy, with the EU, with the UK as well. I think I noticed that they also had some nice relationships and even some collaborations with the Chinese government. And obviously there was the vaccine issue as well, because we're such a poor country and in such need, and hence today we still don't have enough vaccines. But there was an attempt from the transitional government to sort of get closer to the other end of the geopolitical spectrum. However, they did so poorly because they violated human rights, just like I mentioned. There were huge cases of corruption during the pandemic, one of them with respirators imported to the country. And they were also so bad at conducting, at leading a country that was already so divided. And we needed leadership that was going to kind of reconciliate the country and guide us out of the crisis, instead of just being stuck in this endless loop of one end of the political spectrum against another. And, you know, with their many, many mistakes, they kind of paved the way for the mass to present themselves as a party that actually care about the people. And when they have the support of big powers like China in order to create effective social media campaigns, I can see how they easily turn around the vote. I do acknowledge and respect that there are people that find themselves more identified with the mass party. It's sad to me to see that a party that could have been so much to Bolivia ends up being just another little slave of Chinese interests. It's very, very disappointing. And obviously I will never support that party. But, you know, we had our chance to do better. And the political opposition in Bolivia was not ready to lead that. And this is why we are here today. And that is why, too, I'm hoping that working from civil society and keep talking about these issues, even if things don't look great today, we can hopefully eventually create new political ideas so that we don't have to be stuck between two really bad options.
You mentioned the Zapata thing. You want to tell us about that?
Yes. So Oprah moment begins. This was a woman that was actually, seems like she was dating the President Morales. And then suddenly a journalist exposed the fact that she had been hired as the head of a Chinese company in Bolivia, a millionaire Chinese company in Bolivia that was doing a lot of work with the Bolivian government. An affair that she started with President Morales when she was underage, which is something that we've seen with many other girls in Bolivia, sadly, and still no investigations or justice on these issues either. But when this was exposed, it was a very interesting time in Bolivian politics, because initially it seemed like she had a baby with President Morales. President Morales gave a press conference where he admitted having had a baby with her and saying that this was going to be investigated, that in theory he didn't remember her and he didn't know she was the head of a Chinese company in Bolivia. Then after that, he said that he never met her, that they never really had a baby. She came out and said that they actually had the baby. Then everyone was wondering, does this baby actually exist? No one knew where it was. Both different people in the government were saying that it did happen, it didn't happen. And obviously, childhood rights are the first thing and foremost. I think that the privacy of this baby, if the baby existed, should be protected above all things. But it was just a huge soap opera. And in the end, she ended up in jail when we had the transitional government. So they sent her to jail. There was no clarification as to what really happened. Like no one up until today knows what happened. And then she sent a letter to one of the ministers in the transitional government saying that she knew that Morales was trying to get her killed and she was asking for help and protection from the state. And then that was honestly one of the last times I heard about her. I think she's still in jail. Again, it shows that corruption in Bolivia is in many, many levels, that the government, the Morales government, this corruption was not unique to them. I think it went out all the way over to Chinese companies in the country as well.
Yeah, corrupt presidents don't make good exes.
Yeah, don't date presidents. It's not a good idea.
Yeah.